The knock on the door came just as the sun was setting, and Ethan Morley nearly dropped the kettle he was lifting from the stove when he saw the massive silhouette through the frosted window glass. He had not expected visitors at his remote farmstead, especially not one that stood well over 6 feet tall with shoulders that seemed to fill the entire doorframe. His hand instinctively went to the hunting knife on his belt as he approached cautiously, years of militia training never quite leaving a man even after he had hung up his sword and picked up a plow. The war had ended 5 years ago, but the habits remained. When he opened the door, the words died in his throat. She was an orc woman, there was no mistaking that. Her skin was a deep forest green that seemed to catch the dying light, and 2 small tusks curved upward from her lower jaw, giving her face a fierce quality that was somehow softened by the uncertainty in her amber eyes. Her black hair was pulled back in a thick braid that fell past her shoulders, and she wore travel-stained leather armor that had seen better days. She was powerfully built, with broad shoulders and muscled arms that spoke of years of hard labor or combat training, but she held herself with a strange tension, as though ready to bolt at any moment. "You are Ethan Morley," she said, and it was not a question. Her voice was deeper than a human woman's, with a slight rasp to it that made each word sound deliberate. "You do not remember me." Ethan studied her face, searching his memory. He had encountered orcs during the war, of course, but mostly across a battlefield or in the chaos of skirmishes along the border territories. This woman looked to be in her mid-20s, roughly his own age, and there was something in her eyes that spoke of old pain. "I am sorry," he said slowly, keeping his hand away from his knife now that he could see she carried no weapon within easy reach. "Should I remember you?" She shifted her weight, and he noticed she favored her left leg slightly. "An old injury, perhaps." "7 years ago," she said, "you were with a militia patrol near the Crescent River. There was a group of orc prisoners being transported to the internment camps. I was one of them." The memory came back in fragments at first, then all at once. He had been barely 18, fresh-faced and still believing the propaganda about orcs being mindless monsters. The prisoners had been chained together, stumbling through the mud while the older soldiers jabbed at them with spears and shouted insults. One of the prisoners had been young, so young with terror in her eyes and blood on her torn clothing. "Gods above," Ethan breathed. "You were just a girl. You could not have been more than 15. 16, she corrected. "Old enough to be considered an enemy combatant by your army standards." Her expression remained carefully neutral, but he could hear the bitterness threading through her words. Old enough to be starved and beaten and worse. Ethan felt heat rise to his cheeks, shame flooding through him. He remembered what had happened next, though he had tried for years to forget. The supply sergeant, drunk on stolen wine, had dragged the young orc girl away from the others while the patrol made camp. Ethan had heard her cry out, a sound of pure terror that had cut through the evening air like a blade. He had not thought. He had simply acted, pulling the sergeant off her and placing himself between them. The sergeant had been furious, had threatened to have Ethan flogged for insubordination, but the patrol captain had been a decent man who had quietly reassigned the sergeant to other duties. Ethan had given the girl water from his own canteen and an extra blanket from his pack, the only kindnesses he could offer before the prisoners were moved out at dawn. "You saved me that night," the orc woman said quietly. "You did not have to. You risked punishment from your own people to protect an enemy. I never forgot your face or your name. I heard the other soldiers call you Morley when they were angry with you afterward." "I did what any decent person would have done," Ethan said, though he knew that was not true. Most of the other soldiers would have looked away or laughed. "No," she said firmly. You did what almost no one would have done, and I swore to myself that if I survived, if I ever found freedom again, I would repay that debt. She straightened her shoulders, meeting his eyes directly. My name is Griska. I escaped from the camps 3 years ago and have been searching for you ever since. I've come to repay it all, every kindness you showed me. I offer you my service, my strength, my loyalty. I will work your farm, guard your home, fight your enemies if you have any. Whatever you need, I will provide it until I have balanced the scales between us. Ethan stared at her, utterly at a loss for words. The sun had nearly set now, and the temperature was dropping quickly. He could see her shivering slightly despite her thick leather armor. Behind her, he noticed a worn pack and bedroll lying in the dirt of his yard. Griska, he said carefully, you do not owe me anything. What I did was basic human decency, not some great heroism that requires repayment. Her jaw tightened, and he saw her hands clench into fists at her sides. Among my people, a life debt is sacred. You preserved my honor and possibly my life that night. I cannot rest until I have repaid it. Please. The last word came out softer, almost pleading. Please let me do this. I have nowhere else to go. My clan cast me out when they learned I wanted to repay a debt to a human. The camps are still hunting for escaped prisoners. I have been alone for so long, and I am so tired. The vulnerability in that admission struck him harder than any weapon could have. He saw past the fierce exterior to the exhausted woman beneath, someone who had been running and hiding for 3 years with only a sense of honor to guide her. Come inside, he said, stepping back from the doorway. At least get warm and have some food. We can talk about the rest after you have rested. Griska hesitated for a long moment, as though suspecting a trap, then nodded slowly. She retrieved her pack and bedroll and followed him into the small farmhouse. The interior was modest but clean, with a stone fireplace taking up most of one wall and a simple wooden table with 2 chairs in the center of the main room. A ladder led up to a sleeping loft, and 2 doors opened to a small bedroom and a storage pantry. Ethan had built most of the furniture himself after purchasing the land with his military severance pay, and while it was not fancy, it was solid and functional. Griska stood awkwardly near the door, looking around with careful attention to detail. He could see her cataloging everything, noting the hunting bow on the wall, the dried herbs hanging from the rafters, the stack of firewood by the hearth. Old survival instincts, perhaps, always marking exits and potential weapons. Sit, Ethan said, gesturing to one of the chairs. I have stew on the fire. It is not much, just rabbit and vegetables, but it is hot. She sat gingerly, as though afraid the chair might collapse under her weight, though Ethan had built it sturdy enough to hold a much larger man. He ladled stew into 2 wooden bowls and set one in front of her along with a hunk of dark bread and a cup of water from the pump. Griska stared at the food for a moment, then looked up at him with suspicion clear in her eyes. Why are you being kind to me again? I am an orc. Your people hate mine. Some do, Ethan admitted, settling into the chair across from her. But I have seen enough of war to know that hatred only breeds more hatred. Besides, you came to my door asking for work, not trouble, and you look half-starved. Eat, please. She picked up the spoon and began to eat slowly at first, then with increasing hunger, as though she had not had a proper meal in days. Ethan ate his own portion in silence, giving her time to satisfy her hunger before pressing her with questions. When she finally set down her empty bowl, she met his eyes again. Thank you. I have been rationing my supplies to make them last, and it has been lean traveling. How did you find me? He asked. This farm is not exactly easy to locate, and I have not used my militia name in years. I started by asking questions in the border towns, Griska said. It took me a year just to narrow down which patrol you had been part of and what direction you came from. Then I learned you had purchased land in the frontier territories after the war ended. From there, it was a matter of asking travelers and merchants until I heard about a young human man named Ethan who farmed alone in the northern hills. I have been watching your farm for 3 days to make certain it was you. The thought of being watched should have unnerved him, but instead, Ethan found himself impressed by her determination. That is dedication. You could have built a new life somewhere else in 3 years. Why chase after a debt you say I am owed? Because honor is all I have left, Griska said simply. My clan called me a traitor for wanting to repay a human. The camps took my childhood. The war took my parents. This debt to you, this purpose, it is the only thing that has kept me moving forward. If you will not accept my service, then I have nothing. The weight of that statement hung in the air between them. Ethan rubbed his face, feeling the stubble on his chin and the exhaustion of a long day's work in his bones. He had been managing the farm alone since he bought it, and while he got by, there was always more work than hours in the day. The northern field needed clearing, the barn roof was developing a leak, and he had been planning to expand his vegetable garden come spring. But taking in an orc woman, even one who claimed a life debt, would invite trouble from his neighbors. The nearest farm was 5 miles away, owned by a family that had lost a son in the war. The village where he traded was another 3 miles beyond that, and while most of the residents were decent folk, there was still fear and suspicion toward any orc who came near human settlements. Yet when he looked at Griska, he saw not a monster but a person who had survived horrors he could barely imagine and still held onto her sense of honor. He saw the girl he had protected 7 years ago, grown into a woman who had crossed half the territory to repay a kindness. "You can stay," he said finally, "but not as a servant or bondservant. If you want to help with the farm work, I will not turn down the assistance, and you are welcome to shelter here. We will call it even once you have rested and recovered your strength. A few months, perhaps, and then you can decide where you want to go from there. Does that sound fair?" Griska's eyes widened, and for a moment he thought she might argue. Then she slowly nodded. "That is more than fair. Thank you, Ethan Morley. You have saved me twice now." "Just Ethan," he said. "And you are not saved yet. Winter is coming, and there is a lot of work to be done before the first snow. I hope you do not mind hard labor." A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, the first he had seen from her. "I am an orc. Hard labor is what we are built for." That first evening passed awkwardly as they negotiated the practicalities of their arrangement. Ethan gave Griska the small bedroom on the ground floor, insisting he preferred the sleeping loft anyway for the warmth that rose from the fireplace. She protested, but he stood firm, and eventually she accepted with quiet gratitude. The next morning, Ethan woke before dawn as was his habit and climbed down from the loft to find Griska already awake, stoking the fire and preparing porridge from the oats he kept in the pantry. She had changed out of her travel-stained armor into simpler clothing, a loose linen shirt and canvas trousers that still looked worn but were at least clean. Her braid hung down her back, and in the soft light of the fire, he noticed small scars along her arms and one that curved from her left ear down to her jaw. "You did not have to cook," he said, stretching out the stiffness in his shoulders. "You fed me last night," Griska replied without turning around. "It is only fair I contribute." She ladled porridge into bowls and set them on the table with the same quiet efficiency he had noticed the night before. They ate in silence, and then Ethan led her outside to show her around the farm. He had 20 acres, about half of it cleared and planted with wheat, barley, and vegetables. The other half was still forested, thick with oak and pine that would need to be cut back if he wanted to expand. He kept a small flock of chickens, a milk cow named Bess, and a sturdy plow horse named Thunder who was getting on in years, but still did his job reliably. Griska listened intently as he explained the daily routines, the feeding schedules, the repairs that needed doing. When he showed her the northern field where stumps still needed to be pulled, she knelt down and wrapped her hands around one of the larger stumps, testing its resistance. "I can clear this," she said confidently. "It will take time, but I am stronger than I look." Ethan did not doubt it. Even in her simple clothes, he could see the powerful muscles in her shoulders and back. Orcs were naturally stronger than humans, he knew, and Griska looked like she had done her share of physical labor. "We will work on it together," he said. "2 sets of hands will make it go faster." She glanced at him, something unreadable in her expression, then nodded. They fell into a routine over the following days. Mornings were spent on the most urgent tasks, harvesting the last of the autumn vegetables, reinforcing the barn against winter winds, chopping firewood to build up the supply for the cold months ahead. Griska worked with a single-minded intensity that sometimes worried Ethan. She would push herself until her hands were raw and her face was streaked with sweat, and only reluctantly would she stop for water or rest. "You are going to injure yourself," he told her one afternoon as they worked on clearing brush from the northern field. "Pace yourself. The work will still be here tomorrow." "I am fine," Griska insisted, though he could see her arms shaking slightly from exertion. "You are not fine," Ethan said firmly. "You are trying to repay some imagined debt by working yourself to death. Stop." She set down the axe she had been using and turned to face him, frustration clear in her eyes. "You do not understand. I need to do this. I need to prove I am worth the kindness you have shown me." "You do not have to prove anything," Ethan said, softening his tone. "You are worth kindness just by being a person, Griska. You do not have to earn it." She looked away, her jaw tight. "That is easy for you to say. You are human. You are welcome in villages and towns. People do not spit at you or call you monster. I have to be useful or I am nothing." The pain in her words cut him deeply. He wanted to argue to tell her she was wrong, but he knew she was speaking from years of bitter experience. Instead, he walked over to where she stood and gently took the axe from her hands. "You are a person," he said quietly. "Not a tool, not a monster. A person who deserves rest and food and safety just like anyone else. Now come on, let us go back to the house. I will make us some tea and we can plan tomorrow's work." Griska followed him back reluctantly, but over the evening, he saw some of the tension leave her shoulders as they sat by the fire and talked. He told her about his life before the war, growing up in a small farming community to the south, learning his letters from the village priest, joining the militia when he turned 17 because it seemed like the right thing to do. She listened quietly, occasionally asking questions, and he got the sense that she was trying to understand him as much as he was trying to understand her. When he asked about her life, she was more hesitant. "My clan lived in the high mountains to the east," she said slowly. "We were herders mostly, goats and sheep. It was a hard life, but it was ours. Then the war came and the human armies pushed into our territories. My parents sent me away with a group heading west, hoping I would be safer. Instead, we were captured by a patrol." She paused, staring into the fire. "You know what happened after that?" "I am sorry," Ethan said, and meant it. "I am sorry for what my people did to yours." Griska glanced at him, surprise flickering across her face. "You were just a soldier following orders. You are not responsible for the war." "Maybe not," Ethan said. "But I am responsible for my own actions, and I did not do enough to stop the cruelty I saw. I should have done more." "You did more than anyone else," Griska said softly. That night when you stopped that man, you gave me hope that not all humans were monsters. It was the only hope I had for a long time. They sat in silence after that, but it was a more comfortable silence than before, as though acknowledging their shared pain had created a fragile bridge between them. As the weeks passed, that bridge grew stronger. Griska slowly stopped pushing herself so hard, accepting that she did not have to prove her worth every single day. She learned the rhythms of the farm, anticipating what needed doing and working alongside Ethan with easy efficiency. She was surprisingly good with the animals, and Thunder the horse seemed to take a particular liking to her, often nuzzling at her pockets for treats. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire and talk, sharing stories of their lives and their worlds. Griska taught him a few words in her native language, laughing at his clumsy pronunciation. He taught her how to read, something she had never learned, and watched with quiet pride as she slowly worked her way through the few books he owned. One evening, as the first snow began to fall outside, Griska looked up from the book she was reading and said, I have never felt safe before, not really. Even with my clan, there was always danger. Predators, harsh weather, neighboring clans who wanted our territory. And after the war, there was nowhere I could rest without fear. But here, in this house, I feel safe. Ethan felt warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the fire. I am glad, he said. You deserve to feel safe. She smiled at him, a real smile that reached her eyes, and he felt something shift in the air between them. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but he became acutely aware of her in a way he had not been before. The way the firelight played across her green skin, bringing out undertones of gold and bronze. The strength in her hands as she turned the pages of the book. The sound of her laugh when he told a particularly bad joke. He pushed the thoughts away, telling himself it was foolish to think of her that way. She was an orc, he was human, and the world did not look kindly on such pairings. More importantly, she had come to him because of a debt, not because she wanted anything more. The last thing he wanted was to make her uncomfortable or to ruin the friendship they had built. But the thoughts kept returning, especially in the quiet moments. When they worked side by side in the fields, their hands occasionally brushing as they passed tools. When she laughed at something he said, and her face lit up with genuine joy. When she fell asleep by the fire after a long day, her features soft and peaceful in a way he rarely saw when she was awake. Winter settled in fully by late November, bringing snow and ice that made outdoor work difficult. They spent more time inside, Ethan working on repairing tools and tack while Griska practiced her reading or helped with cooking and mending. The forced proximity should have been awkward, but instead, Ethan found he looked forward to the long evenings, to the comfortable silence broken by occasional conversation. One night, a fierce storm blew in, rattling the shutters and howling around the corners of the house. Ethan was woken in the small hours by a sound from below, a soft whimper that made his heart clench. He climbed down from the loft quietly and saw Griska sitting by the dying fire, her knees drawn up to her chest and her face buried in her arms. "Griska," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. She looked up, and even in the dim light he could see the tracks of tears on her face. "I am sorry," she said quickly, wiping at her eyes. "I did not mean to wake you. What is wrong?" He crossed to sit beside her, keeping a respectful distance but close enough to offer comfort. "Just dreams," she said, her voice rough. "I get them sometimes. Memories of the camps. Usually I can push them away, but the storm tonight, the sound of the wind, it reminds me of the nights in the holding pens. The cold and the fear and the—" She broke off, shaking her head. "I am sorry." "You do not want to hear this." "I do," Ethan said gently. If you want to talk about it, I am here." Griska was quiet for a long moment, then began to speak in a halting voice. She told him about the camps, the brutal conditions, the guards who treated the prisoners as less than animals. She told him about the other orcs she had met there, some who had given up hope entirely and others who had clung to it fiercely. She told him about her escape 3 years ago, how she had fled into the wilderness with nothing but the clothes on her back and had survived through sheer determination. "I thought finding you would fix everything," she said quietly. "I thought that once I repaid my debt I would feel whole again, but I do not think debts can heal what the war broke inside me." "No," Ethan agreed, "but time can, and friendship, and knowing you are not alone anymore." He hesitated, then reached out to place his hand over hers. "You are not alone, Griska. I promise you that." She looked down at their hands, hers so much larger than his, her green skin such a stark contrast to his pale human flesh. Then she turned her hand over and laced her fingers through his, holding on tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. They sat together by the fire until dawn, not speaking, just drawing comfort from each other's presence. When the morning light finally crept through the windows, Griska pulled away gently and went to start breakfast, but something had changed between them. A new level of trust had been reached, a deeper understanding forged. As winter deepened, they settled into an even closer routine. Ethan found himself watching Griska more often, noticing the little things about her. The way she hummed tunelessly to herself when she cooked, the fierce concentration on her face when she worked on a difficult task, the gentleness in her hands when she handled the animals. He caught himself imagining what it would be like to wake up beside her every morning, to build a life with her that went beyond their current arrangement. But he said nothing, afraid to risk what they had built. Griska, for her part, seemed to be fighting her own internal battle. He sometimes caught her looking at him with an expression he could not quite read, something between longing and fear. Once, when they were working in the barn and he reached past her to grab a tool, she inhaled sharply and stepped back quickly, her cheeks darkening with what might have been a blush. She made an excuse about needing to check on the chickens and fled before he could say anything. The tension between them grew as the weeks passed, unspoken but undeniable. They danced around it carefully, neither willing to be the first to acknowledge what was happening. The breaking point came in early February, on a day when the temperature had risen enough to melt some of the snow and make the roads passable again. Ethan made the trek into the village to trade for supplies, something he had been putting off because he did not want to face the questions he knew would come. Griska had insisted on staying at the farm, claiming someone needed to tend to the animals, but he suspected she was afraid of the reception she would receive in the village. The trading post was busy when he arrived, full of other farmers and homesteaders who had been similarly isolated by the winter weather. Ethan conducted his business quickly, exchanging wool and preserved vegetables for flour, salt, and a few other necessities. He was almost finished when he heard someone call his name. "Ethan Morley. I heard a rumor I did not want to believe." He turned to see Marcus Trent, a farmer whose land bordered his to the east. Marcus was a hard man, weathered by years of frontier living, and he had lost a brother in the war. His expression now was dark with suspicion. "Marcus," Ethan said neutrally, "what rumor would that be?" "That you are harboring an orc on your farm," Marcus said loudly enough that several other people turned to look. "Tell me it is not true." Ethan felt anger flare in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "I have a farmhand helping me through the winter. What of it? What of it?" Marcus's voice rose. "You are bringing a monster right to our doorstep. Orcs cannot be trusted. They are savages, killers. You are putting all of us at risk." "She is not a monster," Ethan said, his own voice hardening. She is a person who needed help and I gave it to her. If that offends you, then we have nothing more to discuss." "You are a fool," Marcus spat. "That creature will turn on you the first chance it gets. And when it does, do not come crying to the rest of us for help." Ethan turned away without responding, gathering his supplies and heading for the door. But he could hear the whispers following him, feel the eyes on his back. Word would spread quickly, he knew. He had just made himself an outcast in the community he had tried to build a life in. The journey home felt longer than usual, weighed down by anger and worry. He had known there would be consequences to taking Griska in, but facing the actual hostility of his neighbors made it real in a way he had not fully prepared for. When he arrived back at the farm, he found Griska in the barn, mucking out the stalls. She looked up as he entered, and her expression immediately shifted to concern. "What happened?" she asked. "You look troubled." Ethan set down the supplies and rubbed his face. "The village knows you are here. It did not go well." Griska's face fell, and she set aside the rake she had been using. "I should leave. I have brought you trouble, and that was not my intent." "No," Ethan said firmly. "You are not leaving. Let them talk. We have done nothing wrong." "Ethan, you do not understand," Griska said, her voice urgent. "If they turn against you, you will lose everything. Your trade connections, your place in the community, your reputation. I will not let you sacrifice all of that for me." "Then what was all of this for?" Ethan demanded, surprising himself with the heat in his voice. "You came here to repay a debt, to make amends for a kindness I showed you." "Well, here is another kindness, Griska. I am choosing to let you stay because I want you here. Not because of some debt or obligation, but because in the past few months you have become important to me. You have become a friend, and I will not turn my back on you just because some narrow-minded people cannot see past their prejudices." Griska stared at him, her eyes wide. "You truly mean that?" "Yes," Ethan said, some of his anger draining away. "I truly mean that. You belong here if you want to stay." For a long moment, Griska said nothing. Then she crossed the space between them in 2 long strides and pulled him into a crushing embrace. Ethan stiffened in surprise, then slowly relaxed, wrapping his arms around her and holding her tightly. She was warm and solid against him, her heart beating rapidly beneath his ear. "I want to stay," she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "I want to stay more than anything." They stood there in the barn, holding each other as the afternoon light slanted through the gaps in the walls and the animals moved quietly in their stalls. When they finally pulled apart, Ethan saw that Griska's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." Ethan smiled at her, feeling a lightness in his chest despite the trouble he knew was coming. "We will face whatever happens together, I promise." But the trouble came sooner than he expected. 3 days later, Ethan was in the northern field, checking on the drainage ditches they had dug before the freeze, when he saw a group of riders approaching the farm. Griska was at the house, and he felt a spike of fear for her safety. He ran back across the fields, his breath coming in harsh gasps, and reached the yard just as the riders pulled up in front of the house. There were 5 of them, including Marcus Trent and the village sheriff, a grizzled man named Samuel Porter. "Morley," Porter said, dismounting from his horse. "We need to talk." "About what?" Ethan asked, positioning himself between the riders and his front door, behind which he knew Griska was likely listening. "About the orc you are harboring," Porter said bluntly. "We have had reports that you are keeping a fugitive on your property. An escaped prisoner from the internment camps." Ethan's blood ran cold. "She is not a fugitive. The war is over. Those camps should have been disbanded years ago." "The camps are still in operation by order of the territorial governor," Porter said. Any orc who cannot provide proof of legal residency is subject to detainment. Your farmhand fits that description. She is under my protection, Ethan said, his voice tight. She has done nothing wrong. That is not for you to decide, Marcus interjected. The law is the law, Morley. Hand her over and there will be no trouble. I will not do that, Ethan said flatly. Porter sighed, looking genuinely regretful. Son, do not make this harder than it has to be. I have a writ here authorizing me to search your property and detain any unauthorized orcs. You can cooperate or I can arrest you for obstruction. What is it going to be? Before Ethan could answer, the door opened behind him and Griska stepped out. She had removed her leather armor and stood in her simple work clothes, her hands visible and empty of weapons. She looked calm, but Ethan could see the fear in her eyes. There is no need for trouble, she said evenly. I will go with you. No, Ethan said immediately, turning to her. You will not. Ethan, please, Griska said softly. I cannot let them arrest you because of me. This is not your fight. Yes, it is, Ethan said fiercely. You are not going back to those camps. I will not allow it. Porter dismounted and walked forward slowly, his hand resting on the cudgel at his belt. Morley, step aside. Do not throw your life away for this. My life will not mean much if I step aside, Ethan said, not moving. I will not abandon her. Not again. The riders shifted uneasily, and Ethan realized with grim satisfaction that they had not expected resistance. Most people in the territory deferred to the law without question, but Ethan had spent years in the militia learning to think for himself and to question orders that did not sit right with his conscience. I am offering you one last chance, Porter said. Move, or I will move you. Ethan stood his ground, his mind racing. He could not fight off 5 armed men, and even if he could, assaulting the sheriff would make him a fugitive too. But he could not just let them take Griska. There had to be another way. Wait, Griska said, stepping up beside him. There is another option. Everyone turned to look at her. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly, then looked directly at Ethan. Human law says that orcs with legal residency cannot be detained without cause. Is that correct? She asked Porter. Yes, Porter said cautiously. But you do not have legal residency. But I could, Griska said. If I were married to a human citizen, I would have legal protections as his wife. The territorial laws are clear on that point. Ethan's mind reeled as he understood what she was suggesting. Marriage. She was proposing marriage to him right now as a way to protect herself from being dragged back to the camps. That is a loophole, Marcus objected. You cannot just marry someone to avoid the law. It is not a loophole, Porter said slowly. It is the actual law. If they were married, she would be protected. He looked at Ethan. Is that what you want, Morley, to marry her? Ethan looked at Griska, seeing the hope and fear warring in her eyes. This was not how he had imagined this moment, if he had imagined it at all. Not a desperate ploy to avoid arrest, but a real commitment made freely and with joy. But as he looked at her, he realized the truth that had been growing in his heart for months. He wanted this. He wanted her. Not because of a debt or a loophole, but because somewhere along the way he had fallen in love with her. Yes, he said clearly. That is what I want. Griska's eyes widened and he saw shock ripple across her face. Ethan, you do not have to do this. I was offering a solution, not demanding. I know, Ethan said, taking her hands in his. They were shaking. But I am not doing this just to save you from the camps, Griska. I am doing this because I want to. Because over these past few months, you have become the most important person in my life. Because I wake up every morning grateful you are here, and I go to sleep every night hoping you will still be here tomorrow. If you will have me, I want to marry you. Not as a legal trick, but as a real marriage. A real partnership. Tears spilled down Griska's cheeks, cutting tracks through the thin layer of dust on her green skin. "I want that too," she whispered. "I have wanted it for weeks, but I was afraid to say anything. I thought you could never see me as anything but an orc, a burden you had taken on out of pity." "Never," Ethan said fiercely. "You are strong and brave and kind. You are beautiful inside and out, and I love you." The words hung in the air between them, and then Griska pulled him into a kiss that was fierce and desperate and full of all the longing they had both been holding back. Her tusks bumped against his cheek, and her hands gripped his shoulders hard enough to leave marks, but he did not care. He kissed her back with everything he had, pouring months of unspoken feelings into that single moment. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ethan became aware of the uncomfortable silence from the riders. He turned to face Porter, still holding Griska's hand. "We want to be married," he said. "Right now, if possible. You are an authorized officiant, are you not?" Porter looked deeply uncomfortable, but he nodded slowly. "I am. And if you are both of legal age and sound mind, I can perform the ceremony. But Morley, are you absolutely certain about this? Once it is done, there is no going back without a formal dissolution, and that will be a legal nightmare." "I am certain," Ethan said without hesitation. "I am too," Griska added, her voice steady now. Marcus made a sound of disgust. "This is madness. Porter, you cannot seriously be considering marrying a human to an orc." "I do not have to like it," Porter said. "But the law does not forbid it, and if they want to bind themselves together, that is their business." He dismounted fully and pulled a small book from his saddlebag, one that Ethan recognized as the official territorial legal code. "Let us get this over with." The ceremony was brief and perfunctory, nothing like the grand weddings Ethan had attended in his youth. Porter recited the legal binding words, asked them each to affirm their consent, and then pronounced them married under territorial law. There were no rings, no flowers, no family present to witness. Just two people standing in a farmyard, holding hands while hostile neighbors looked on. But when it was done and Ethan kissed his wife for the second time, he felt a joy so profound, it nearly brought him to his knees. "It is done," Porter said, marking something in a ledger he had brought. "Griska Morley, you are now a legal resident of this territory with all the rights and protections thereof. I will file the paperwork when I return to the village." He looked between them, his expression unreadable. "I hope you both know what you are getting yourselves into." "We do," Ethan said firmly. The riders left without another word, though Marcus shot them both a look of pure disgust as he rode away. Ethan and Griska stood together in the yard, watching them disappear down the road, neither quite believing what had just happened. "We are married," Griska said faintly. "We are actually married." "We are," Ethan confirmed. Then, because he could not help himself, he started to laugh. It bubbled up from deep in his chest, a release of all the tension and fear and uncertainty. Griska stared at him for a moment, then began to laugh too, and they stood there giggling like children until tears streamed down both their faces. "This is insane," Griska gasped. "We got married to avoid my arrest." "We got married because we love each other," Ethan corrected, pulling her close. "The arrest was just the catalyst. I would have asked you eventually, you know. I was just too cowardly to risk it." "I would have said yes," Griska said, resting her forehead against his. "I fell in love with you weeks ago, maybe months. I do not even know when it happened, only that it did." "For me, it was gradual," Ethan said. "Every day I found another reason to love you. The way you care for the animals, the way you laugh, the way you push yourself so hard because you think you have something to prove. The way you look at me sometimes, like I am something precious. You are everything I did not know I needed, Griska." She kissed him again, softer this time, and he felt warmth spread through him from head to toe. When they finally went inside hand in hand, the farmhouse felt different somehow. Not just a shelter, but a home. Their home. That night, they talked for hours by the fire, making plans for their future. They would face challenges, they both knew. The community would not accept them easily, and there would be those who tried to undermine their marriage. But they also had each other, and that was more than enough. "I want to expand the farm," Ethan said. "Clear more land, maybe add a few sheep. If we work together, we could make this place really thrive." "I want to learn to read better," Griska said, "and maybe write. I want to be able to keep records, maybe even write letters if we ever find others like us. Humans and orcs who have chosen to build lives together. There must be others," Ethan said thoughtfully. "The war has been over for 5 years. Surely we are not the only two people who have looked past the old hatreds." "Perhaps," Griska said. "But even if we are, I am content. I have you and I have this place. That is more than I ever dreamed I would have." As winter gave way to early spring, Ethan and Griska settled into their new life as husband and wife. The community's reaction was mixed at best. Some of their neighbors refused to acknowledge Griska's existence at all, turning away when they saw her in the village. Others were more openly hostile, muttering insults or making gestures to ward off evil. But there were a precious few, who were willing to accept them. An elderly woman named Clara, who ran a small bakery in the village, went out of her way to be kind to Griska, teaching her how to make bread and refusing to listen to the gossip. A young couple, Elias and Anna, who farmed land to the west, invited them for dinner and treated Griska with genuine warmth. These small kindnesses meant more than Ethan could express. The farm flourished under their joint efforts. Griska's strength made clearing the northern field far easier than it would have been alone, and by the time spring planting came, they had nearly doubled their arable land. Ethan taught her the finer points of farming, how to rotate crops, when to plant and harvest, how to read the weather signs. She proved to be a quick study, approaching each new skill with the same focused determination she brought to everything. In turn, Griska taught him things from her culture. She showed him how orcs tracked game in the forest, how to read animal signs he had missed all his life. She taught him songs in her language, hauntingly beautiful melodies that spoke of mountains and home. She introduced him to traditional orc foods, hearty stews made with wild herbs and roots she foraged from the forest. They also navigated the intimate aspects of their marriage, learning each other's bodies and preferences with patience and care. Ethan had been nervous the first night they shared a bed as husband and wife, worried about the physical differences between them, but Griska had been patient and gentle, guiding him with quiet reassurance. They learned together, discovering a passion that burned bright between them. One evening in late spring, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Griska said, "I have something to tell you." Ethan looked over at her, noting the nervous excitement in her eyes. "What is it?" "I think I am with child," she said softly. "It is early still, but all the signs are there. By late autumn we may be 3 instead of 2. Ethan felt his heart leap into his throat. A baby. They were going to have a baby. He pulled Griska into his arms, holding her tightly as joy and fear warred within him. "Are you happy?" Griska asked, her voice small. "I know we have not been married long and a child will bring complications. A half-orc child will face prejudice from both our peoples." "I am terrified," Ethan admitted, "but I am also happier than I can say. We will love this child, Griska. We will protect them and teach them and make sure they know they are wanted. That is all any parent can do." Griska relaxed against him, and he felt her smile against his shoulder. "We will be good parents," she said. I am certain of it. The pregnancy progressed normally through the summer months, and Griska remained active on the farm, though Ethan worried constantly about her overexerting herself. She laughed at his concerns but did agree to take things a bit easier, focusing on lighter tasks and letting him handle the heavy labor. In early autumn, when the leaves were turning gold and red, Griska's sister arrived at the farm. Ethan was in the barn when he heard raised voices from the yard. He ran out to find Griska facing off against another orc woman, this one slightly shorter but with the same green skin and fierce eyes. They were arguing in their native language rapid-fire words that Ethan could not follow, but the emotion was clear. Anger, pain, and beneath it all, love. Griska, he said cautiously, approaching slowly. Both women turned to look at him. Griska's expression was torn while the other orc woman looked at him with open suspicion. Ethan, this is my sister Mara, Griska said in the common tongue. She found me. I do not know how, but she found me. I tracked you for months, Mara said, also speaking common though with a heavier accent than Griska. I had to know if you were alive, if you were safe, and I find you married to a human. She said the word like a curse. What have you done, sister? I have found happiness, Griska said, her voice firm. I know you do not understand, but Ethan is a good man. He saved my life twice over. He loves me, and I love him. Mara looked between them, her expression skeptical. The clan elders sent me to bring you home if I found you. They said you could be forgiven if you renounce this madness and return to our people. I am not going back, Griska said. This is my home now. This is my family. She placed a hand over her rounded belly, which was just beginning to show her pregnancy. I am carrying a child, Mara. My child and Ethan's. I will not abandon them. Mara's eyes widened as she noticed the pregnancy and something crumpled in her expression. A half-breed child, she whispered. Griska, what have you done? I have chosen love, Griska said simply. I have chosen to build a life with someone who treats me with respect and kindness. I know the clan does not approve, but I am not asking for their approval. I am asking you, my sister, to understand. Mara stood silent for a long moment, then walked over to Griska and pulled her into a fierce embrace. Griska stiffened in surprise, then wrapped her arms around her sister, both of them holding on tightly. I cannot approve, Mara said, her voice thick with emotion. But you are my sister, and I cannot lose you again. If this is truly what you want, if this human truly makes you happy, then I will accept it. Thank you, Griska whispered. That means everything to me. Mara stayed with them for 3 days, and in that time, Ethan saw her slowly warm to him. She was gruff and blunt, as seemed common with orc culture, but she also saw how he treated Griska, the respect and love evident in every interaction. She saw the farm they had built together, the life they were creating. On the morning she left, Mara pulled Ethan aside. I do not understand you, human, she said, but I see that you care for my sister. If you ever hurt her, I will find you and make you regret it. Do you understand? Completely, Ethan said, meeting her eyes. But I promise you, I would cut off my own hand before I hurt her. Mara studied him, then nodded slowly. I believe you. Take care of her and take care of the little one when they come. She pressed something into his hand, a small carved stone in the shape of a mountain. This is a clan token. If you ever need help, if anyone threatens your family, send this to the mountains and my clan will know to send aid. We may not approve of your union, but blood protects blood. Ethan closed his hand around the token, feeling its weight. Thank you. This means more than you know. Mara left without another word, disappearing into the forest as silently as she had come. Griska watched her go with tears in her eyes, and Ethan held her close, offering what comfort he could. She understands, he said softly. In her own way, she understands. I know, Griska said. And that is enough. As autumn deepened and the harvest came in, Ethan and Griska prepared for the arrival of their child. They converted the storage room into a small nursery, building a cradle from oak wood and sewing blankets from soft wool. Clara from the village brought over baby clothes her own grandchildren had outgrown, a gesture of kindness that made Griska cry with gratitude. The baby came on a cold night in late October, arriving with the first snowfall of the season. Ethan rode frantically to the village to fetch the midwife, a practical woman named Helen who had delivered half the babies in the territory. She took one look at Griska, in labor and clearly terrified, and immediately set to work with calm efficiency. "First child?" Helen asked, washing her hands in the basin Ethan had prepared. "Yes," Griska gasped, gripping Ethan's hand hard enough to make him wince. "Well, orc or human, babies come the same way," Helen said briskly. "You are going to be just fine, dear. Now let us see how far along you are." The labor lasted through the night and into the early morning, and Ethan stayed by Griska's side the entire time, holding her hand and whispering encouragement. He had never felt so helpless, watching her in pain and being unable to do anything to ease it. Finally, as the sun rose and painted the sky pink and gold, their child arrived. A daughter, small but healthy, with pale green skin that was a perfect blend of both her parents. She had tiny tusks just barely visible, and when she opened her eyes, they were a striking amber, just like Griska's. "She is perfect," Griska breathed, cradling the baby against her chest as tears streamed down her face. "She is absolutely perfect." Ethan felt his own eyes burning as he looked at his daughter. She was so small, so fragile, and yet she represented everything he and Griska had fought for. Hope. Love, a future where humans and orcs could come together and create something beautiful. "What should we name her?" he asked softly. Griska thought for a moment, then smiled. "Hope. Let us name her Hope because that is what she represents." "Hope Morley," Ethan said, testing the name. It felt right. "Welcome to the world, little one. Your mother and I are going to do everything we can to make it a good place for you." Helen finished her work and packed up her supplies, refusing payment beyond a basket of vegetables from their stores. "You take care of that baby," she said gruffly, "and ignore anyone who has unkind things to say. She is a beautiful child and she is lucky to have parents who love her." As autumn turned to winter, Ethan and Griska adjusted to life with a newborn. Hope was a good baby, though she had powerful lungs when she wanted something. Griska proved to be a natural mother, patient and attentive, though she sometimes struggled with doubts about whether she was doing things correctly. "What if I am not good enough?" she asked one night as she nursed Hope by the fire. "What if I cannot protect her from the hatred she will face?" "You are more than good enough," Ethan said, sitting beside her, "and we will protect her together. We will teach her to be strong and proud of who she is. We will make sure she knows she is loved, no matter what anyone else says." "I want her to have a better life than I did," Griska said quietly. "I want her to grow up knowing she belongs somewhere, that she has a home and a family who will never abandon her." "She will," Ethan promised. "We will make sure of it." As Hope grew through her first year, she brought unexpected joy to the community. Some of the villagers who had been most hostile to Griska softened when they saw the baby, unable to sustain their anger in the face of such innocence. Clara became an honorary grandmother, often stopping by with treats or toys she had made. Elias and Anna visited frequently, their own children fascinated by the baby with the different colored skin. There were still those who refused to accept them, of course. Marcus Trent and his ilk continued to mutter about abominations and corrupted bloodlines. But their voices grew quieter as more people in the community saw that Ethan and Griska were just a family trying to make a life together, no different from any other couple in the territory. On Hope's first birthday, they held a small celebration at the farm. Clara brought a cake, Elias and Anna came with their children, and even Helen, the midwife, stopped by. It was a small gathering, but it was filled with warmth and laughter. As Ethan watched Griska playing with Hope in the grass, both of them laughing as Hope toddled around on unsteady legs, he felt a profound sense of contentment. This was what he had fought for during the war, though he had not known it at the time. Not glory or territory, but the simple right for people to live in peace and build families without fear. "You look deep in thought," Griska said, walking over to him with Hope balanced on her hip. The baby reached for him and he took her, settling her comfortably against his shoulder. "Just thinking about how lucky I am," Ethan said. 7 years ago, I was a scared kid in a militia uniform who did one decent thing, and that one choice led me here to you, to her, to a life I never imagined I could have. You saved me twice," Griska said softly. "Once from that sergeant and once from a life spent running and hiding. You gave me a home and a family and a future. I am the lucky one, Ethan." "We are both lucky," Ethan said, leaning in to kiss her. Hope giggled and patted his face with her small hands, making them both laugh. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the farm, their friends and neighbors gathered around them, sharing food and stories. It was a small community, a fragile one, but it was built on acceptance and love rather than fear and hatred. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home and Hope had been put to bed, Ethan and Griska sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Griska leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Marrying me, I mean." "Your life would be easier if you had chosen differently." "Easier, maybe," Ethan said, "but not better, not fuller, not happier. I chose you, Griska, and I would choose you again 1,000 times over. You and Hope are my whole world." "And you are ours," Griska said, lacing her fingers through his. "When I knocked on your door that first night, I thought I was coming to repay a debt. I did not realize I was coming home." "You were always coming home," Ethan said. "We just did not know it yet." They sat in comfortable silence, two souls who had found each other against all odds, building a life together one day at a time. The road ahead would not always be easy, they both knew. There would be challenges, prejudices to overcome, difficulties they could not yet foresee. But they would face them together, as they had faced everything else. In the house behind them, Hope slept peacefully in her cradle, dreaming baby dreams. She was the future, a living bridge between two peoples who had been at war for so long. And in her very existence, there was hope that the world could change, that old hatreds could heal, that love could triumph over fear. The seasons turned as they always did, and the Morley farm continued to thrive. Spring brought new planting, summer brought growth and abundance, autumn brought harvest, and winter brought rest and reflection. Through it all, Ethan and Griska worked side by side, their partnership growing stronger with each passing year. When Hope was 3 years old, she began asking questions about why she looked different from the other children in the village. Griska sat her down and explained, in simple terms a child could understand, that she was special because she came from 2 different peoples. That her father was human and her mother was orc, and that made her unique and beautiful. "Some people might say unkind things because they do not understand," Griska said gently, brushing Hope's dark hair back from her forehead. "But you must remember that you are loved and you are wanted and you have nothing to be ashamed of." "I love being special," Hope declared with the absolute certainty of childhood, and both her parents smiled. As Hope grew older, she proved to be a perfect blend of both her parents. She had her mother's strength and determination, able to help with farm chores that would have been difficult for a human child her age. But she also had her father's gentle nature and curiosity, always asking questions about how things worked and why the world was the way it was. She learned to read at an early age, devouring the books in their small collection and always begging for more. Ethan made special trips to larger towns to find books for her, building a library that became the pride of their household. She learned farming from both her parents, understanding both the human methods her father had learned and the orc traditions her mother brought from her own upbringing. By the time Hope was 5, the community had largely accepted the Morley family. There were still whispers and occasional pointed comments, but for the most part, people had grown used to seeing Griska in the village or Hope playing with the other children. The family had become an established part of the community, strange perhaps, but no longer threatening. One summer evening, when Hope was 7, they received another unexpected visitor. This time it was an old soldier, his face scarred and his hair gone gray, who rode up to the farm looking exhausted. Ethan recognized him immediately, though it took a moment to place the name. "Captain Brennan," he said, surprise coloring his voice. "I did not expect to see you again." "Morley," Brennan said, dismounting stiffly. "I heard you were living out here. I have been traveling the territory, tracking down some of the men from our old patrol. I wanted to see how you were doing." "Well, as you can see," Ethan said, gesturing to the farm. "I am doing well. Please come inside. My wife will want to meet you." Brennan followed him into the house, and his eyes widened when Griska emerged from the kitchen, followed by Hope. For a moment the old captain just stared, then he shook his head slowly. "I heard the rumors," he said, "but I did not quite believe them. You married an orc." "I did," Ethan said, his voice carrying a note of challenge. "Is that a problem?" "Not for me," Brennan said quickly. "I am just surprised, though I suppose I should not be. You always did have a stronger moral compass than the rest of us." He looked at Griska, and his expression turned thoughtful. "I remember you. You were the girl Morley protected from the supply sergeant all those years ago." "You remember," Griska said quietly. "I remember a lot of things I wish I could forget," Brennan said. "The war was full of cruelties, big and small. I am glad to see that at least one good thing came out of those dark times." He looked at Hope, who was peeking out from behind her mother. "And you must be their daughter. You have your mother's eyes." Hope stepped forward, her natural curiosity overcoming her shyness. "Are you really a captain? Do you have a sword?" Brennan laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. "I was a captain, little one. And I did have a sword, but I gave it away when the war ended. I did not need it anymore." They fed Brennan dinner and listened to his stories of the years since the war. He had been traveling, he said, trying to make amends for some of the things he had done and seen during the conflict. He had been visiting families of fallen soldiers, delivering messages and keepsakes. He had been helping to mediate disputes between human and orc communities in the border regions, using his military authority to push for peace. "There are more mixed families than you might think," Brennan said as they sat around the table. "Humans and orcs who have decided the war is over and it is time to build something new. It is not easy for them, but they are trying. Some of them asked me to reach out to you, actually. They wanted to know they were not alone." Griska leaned forward, interest sparking in her eyes. "There are others like us. At least a dozen families that I know of personally," Brennan said. "Probably more that I have not met yet. Most are in remote areas like you, trying to avoid attention. But some are starting to be more open about it. There is even talk of forming a formal community, a place where mixed families could live without fear of prejudice." "Where?" Ethan asked. "The western valleys near the old border lands," Brennan said. "It is rough country, but it is unclaimed territory. No one would bother you there. Several families have already started building homesteads. They are calling it New Haven. Ethan and Griska exchanged glances, a whole conversation passing between them in that look. They had built a life here, had put down roots, but the idea of living among people who understood their situation, who would not judge or whisper, was tempting. "It is worth thinking about," Brennan said, reading their expressions. "I am heading there myself in a few weeks. If you decided to join us, I could show you the way." That night, after Brennan had been settled in the barn for the evening and Hope was asleep, Ethan and Griska talked long into the night about what they should do. "Part of me wants to go," Griska admitted. "To be somewhere Hope could grow up without facing prejudice, where she could just be herself." "But we have built so much here," Ethan said. "This farm, our friends in the community, the life we have made. Can we really just walk away from all of that?" "I do not know," Griska said. "But I also wonder if we owe it to Hope to give her the best chance at happiness. Here, she will always be different, always marked as other. In New Haven, she would be normal. She would fit in." They went back and forth, weighing the pros and cons until finally Ethan said, "Let us ask her. She is old enough to have an opinion about her own life. We will tell her about New Haven and let her help us decide." The next morning, they sat down with Hope and explained the situation as simply as they could. There was a place where families like theirs lived together, where being different was normal. They could stay on the farm they had built or start fresh in this new community. Hope thought about it seriously, her young face scrunched up in concentration. "Will there be other kids like me there?" she asked. "Yes," Ethan said, "lots of them. And no one will be mean to Mama for being an orc." "No," Griska said gently. "Everyone there understands that families come in different forms." Hope nodded slowly. "I like our farm," she said, "but I do not like when people say mean things about us." "If we went to New Haven, would we be happy there?" "I think we could be," Ethan said. "But it would mean leaving behind the home we have built and starting over." Hope looked between her parents, then said with the simple wisdom of a child, "Home is not a place, it is us. Mama, Papa, and me. We are home, so it does not matter where we go as long as we are together." Ethan felt his throat tighten with emotion. His daughter, only 7 years old, had just articulated something he had been struggling to understand. Home was not the farm or the house or even the community. It was the family they had built, the love they shared. "You are absolutely right," he said, pulling Hope into a hug. "So what do you say? Should we go on an adventure to New Haven?" Hope's face lit up. "An adventure?" "Yes." The decision made, they began preparations immediately. They would leave the farm in the care of Elias and Anna, who had agreed to work the land and send them a portion of the profits. It was not an ideal arrangement, but it meant they were not completely abandoning everything they had built. If New Haven did not work out, they would have somewhere to return to. Clara cried when they told her they were leaving, but she understood. "You go find your people," she said, hugging Griska tightly. "You deserve to live somewhere you are fully accepted, but you write to me, you hear. I want to know how that sweet girl is doing." They packed their belongings, taking only what they could carry on a wagon Ethan had purchased for the journey. Clothes, books, tools, seeds from their garden, and keepsakes that held sentimental value. Everything else would stay with the farm. On the morning they left, half the village turned out to see them off. Some were there out of curiosity, others out of genuine affection. Helen pressed a package of medicinal herbs into Griska's hands. Clara gave Hope a rag doll she had sewn herself. Elias and Anna promised to take good care of the farm and to write with news from the territory. As they rode out of the village with Captain Brennan leading the way, Ethan looked back one last time at the place he had called home for nearly 8 years. He felt a pang of sadness, but also excitement for what lay ahead. The journey to New Haven took 3 weeks, traveling through forests and over hills, following trails that sometimes barely deserved the name. Hope treated it like the grand adventure she had been promised, delighting in every new sight and experience. She learned to help set up camp each evening and to identify edible plants Brennan pointed out along the way. They passed other travelers occasionally, and Ethan was struck by how many of them were mixed families like theirs. Humans and orcs traveling together, some with children, all heading in the same direction. They camped together some evenings, sharing food and stories, and Ethan felt a sense of belonging he had not expected. Griska blossomed on the journey, more relaxed and open than he had ever seen her. She spoke with other orcs in their native language, laughing and gesturing animatedly. She taught Hope traditional orc songs and games, things she had been hesitant to share before for fear of making their daughter stand out even more. Finally, they crested a hill and saw New Haven spread out before them in a wide valley. It was still small, perhaps 24 buildings scattered across cleared land, but there was an energy to it, a sense of purpose. People were working together to build a sawmill, to lay out streets, to plant communal gardens. "Welcome to New Haven," Brennan said with a smile. "Your new home." They descended into the valley, and Ethan felt hope swell in his chest. This was a place they could belong. This was a place Hope could grow up proud of who she was. They were greeted warmly by the other residents, shown to a plot of land they could claim as their own, given supplies to help them build a house. Everyone pitched in to help new arrivals, understanding that the community only grew stronger when everyone succeeded. Over the following months, Ethan and Griska built a new home, smaller than their farm had been but comfortable. They planted a garden and helped with communal projects. Hope started attending the small school that had been established, where she learned alongside human, orc, and mixed heritage children, all treated equally. For the first time in their lives, they were not different. They were not strange or unusual. They were just another family in a community full of families like theirs. One evening, nearly a year after they had arrived in New Haven, Ethan and Griska sat on the porch of their new home, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Hope was playing with friends in the distance, her laughter carrying on the wind. "You miss the farm?" Griska asked. "Sometimes," Ethan admitted, "but I do not regret leaving. Look at her, Griska. Look at how happy she is. That is worth more than any piece of land." "She has friends who understand her," Griska said softly. "She will never know what it is like to be the only one, to be different and isolated. We gave her that. We gave ourselves that too," Ethan pointed out. "When was the last time you worried about what the neighbors thought or whether you would be welcome in the village?" Griska smiled. "Not since we came here. This place, these people, they see us as we are, not as orc and human, but as people, as family." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching their daughter play. The journey that had begun 7 years ago with a desperate orc girl at his door had led them here, to a place of peace and acceptance. The debt Griska had felt she owed had long since been repaid, transformed into something far more precious than obligation: love, home, family, future. "You saved me years ago," Griska said quietly, echoing the words she had spoken when she first arrived at his door. "And I came to repay it all. But somewhere along the way you saved me again. And I saved you too, I think. We saved each other." "Yes," Ethan agreed. "We did. And we will keep saving each other every day for the rest of our lives." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Hope ran up to the porch, flushed and happy from playing. "Papa, Mama, can my friend stay for dinner?" "Of course," Griska said, standing to go prepare the meal. "The more the merrier." Ethan watched his wife and daughter head inside, followed by a gaggle of chattering children of all colors and backgrounds, and felt profound gratitude for the life they had built. It had not been easy, and there had been moments when he thought they might not make it. But they had persevered together and found something more beautiful than he had ever imagined possible. Years passed, and New Haven grew from a small settlement into a thriving town. Hope grew from a child into a young woman, strong and confident, embodying the best qualities of both her parents. She became a teacher in the school, helping to educate the next generation of children who would grow up knowing that love transcended the boundaries of race and species. Ethan and Griska grew old together, their hair turning gray, their bodies slowing with age, but their love remaining as strong as ever. They became respected elders in the community, people who had been there from the early days and had helped build something lasting. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the community threw them a celebration. People came from all over the territory, human orc families who had been inspired by their story, who had found courage in their example. There were speeches and toasts, laughter and music. As Ethan danced with Griska under strings of lanterns hung between the buildings, he reflected on the incredible journey of their lives. From a scared militia boy and a terrified prisoner, to a married couple building a farm, to pillars of a new community dedicated to peace and acceptance. "What are you thinking about?" Griska asked, her amber eyes still as bright as the day he had first truly seen her. "I am thinking that I would not change a single moment," Ethan said. "Every hardship, every challenge, every moment of fear or doubt, it all led us here. To this dance, to this life, to this love." "Even the supply sergeant?" Griska asked with a slight smile. "Even that," Ethan said. "Because if that had not happened, you might never have remembered me, you might never have come to my door. And I would have missed out on the greatest adventure of my life." Griska leaned in and kissed him, and around them, their friends and family cheered. Hope stood nearby with her own family, having married a kind young man, half-orc like herself, and they had given Ethan and Griska 2 beautiful grandchildren who played at their feet. As the celebration continued into the night, Ethan held his wife close and looked around at everything they had helped build. A community where love mattered more than prejudice, where families came in all forms and all were welcomed. It was not perfect, there were still challenges and difficulties, but it was good. It was so very good. "Thank you," he whispered to Griska, "for coming to my door all those years ago, for trusting me, for loving me, for building this life with me." "Thank you for opening that door," Griska replied, "for seeing me as a person when others saw a monster, for loving me back, for giving me a home and a family and a future I never dared to dream of." They danced until the stars wheeled overhead and the night grew late, surrounded by love and joy and acceptance. And when they finally retired to their home, walking hand in hand through the quiet streets of New Haven, they knew that they had found something rare and precious. They had found each other. They had found home. And they had proven that love, real and true and deep, could overcome any obstacle, bridge any divide, and create something beautiful and lasting. Their story was not one of grand heroics or dramatic gestures. It was simply a story of 2 people who chose kindness over cruelty, love over hatred, hope over despair. And in choosing those things, they had changed not just their own lives, but the lives of everyone around them, rippling outward to touch hundreds of families who found courage in their example. As Ethan fell asleep that night, Griska curled against his side as she had been for 3 decades. He thought about the young soldier he had been, making a split-second decision to protect a frightened orc girl. He could never have imagined where that decision would lead, the life it would create, the legacy it would leave. But he was grateful, so deeply grateful for every moment of the journey. The story of Ethan and Griska Morley became legend in New Haven, passed down through generations as an example of what was possible when people chose love over fear. Their names were spoken with reverence and affection, a reminder that the greatest revolutions often begin with the smallest acts of kindness. And in the end, that was their true legacy. Not the farm they had built or the town they had helped found, but the simple truth they had lived every day of their lives together, that every person, regardless of their race or origin, deserved to be treated with dignity, respect, and love. That truth echoed through the years, inspiring countless others to follow in their footsteps, to build bridges instead of walls, to choose understanding over prejudice. And though Ethan and Griska eventually passed from the world, as all mortals must, the love they had shared and the community they had helped build continued to thrive, a living testament to the power of two people who had simply chosen to see each other as they truly were. Human and orc, yes, but more importantly, two souls who had found each other against all odds and had built something beautiful together. Their story was complete, their journey ended, but the impact of their lives continued to resonate, touching hearts and changing minds for generations to come. An eternal reminder that love, in all its forms, will always triumph in the end.